because when that which is unmanifest begins to manifest, the first form is an ellipse or an ellipsoid. A three-dimensional ellipse is an ellipsoid. And we know this from our experience, that if we become meditative to a point where your contact with your physical body becomes very minimal, you are almost not the body, then once again our energies take the form of a ellipsoid. They created many. All these things were razed to ground. Only few that are left are generally in India and some other Southeast Asian countries. Otherwise, whole of Arabia and Europe were full of consecrated spaces.
Guruji, what is the significance of Linga?
The word Linga literally means the form. Form means, why we're calling it the form is, when, today modern science is proving to you beyond any doubt that the whole existence is coming from nothing and going back to nothingness. You know this? There was a time when modern science believed everything comes from something, you can neither destroy something nor create something. It can only be transformed from one state to another. You cannot destroy anything nor can you create anything. That was the belief some time ago. But today modern science is proving beyond any doubt that everything comes from nothingness and goes back to nothingness. A whole bunch of galaxies sometimes just collapse into themselves and become nothing, There's something called as black holes. Some of them explode into supernovas, but a lot of them just collapse into themselves and become nothing. So there was something and it became nothing. Similarly, there is nothingness and it becomes somethingness. Nothingness is the very basis of all that is something in the creation, please see. Only because there is a vast nothingness, somethingness has happened in the form of tiny galaxies. If you look up in the sky, generally the way your vision is made is, you think it's full of stars, but that's not the reality. The reality is there's a vast empty space, just tiny spots of stars, isn't it? That's a reality. But because of the way your vision is made, because of a visual deception, it makes you feel as if the sky is full of stars. The sky is full of emptiness, just a little bit of stars, just a little bit of salt and pepper. Rest is all darkness and emptiness. So everything springs from that and goes back to that. When the unmanifest begins to move towards the manifest, when the first manifestation begins, the first form that the energy takes is the form of an ellipsoid. You know what's an ellipsoid? A perfect three-dimensional ellipse is an ellipsoid. The first form is always a perfect ellipsoid. A perfect ellipsoid is what is being referred to as a linga. This we have always known. Yoga has always been saying this. Every human being who's gone deep enough into himself has always known this. But today, modern cosmologists have taken pictures of various galaxies and they say the core of every galaxy is an ellipsoid. Do you know this? No? The core of every galaxy, if you take pictures of it, is always an ellipsoid. So the first form that the unmanifest, when it begins to manifest, it takes the form of an ellipsoid. If you become meditative to a point where you become loose with your body, then you will notice once again your energies become an ellipsoid. That means before dissolution, the final form that you take also is an ellipsoid. So the first form is an ellipsoid, the final form is an ellipsoid. So Linga is seen as a doorway. Either way, either this way or that way, it is a doorway to the beyond. If we take any form, suppose if you give me anything, Let's say you give me this flower. You hold this flower in your hand, feel it, if you're sensitive to it, and give it to me. I'll just hold it in my hand just for 10-20 seconds and give it to you. You will see it'll feel very different. I will make this flower feel very, very different in your hand because I'll energize this in such a way that it'll be vibrant in your hands. But this flower cannot retain it for too long. After some time, it'll be just a piece of organic material. But if you form a perfect ellipsoid, if you form a linga the way it should be and energize it, it'll be a perennial storehouse of energy. There is a whole science as to how to build a linga, the different dimensions, the different qualities that you can attribute to it. It is just that this science, which is very essential and very fundamental science, has been lost to some extent or to a large extent because the bhakti movement swept the country about 700, 800 years ago. The bhaktas took over temple building. So the science of how to make it, they dropped it because for a bhakta means a devotee is not interested in any science. It is just the strength of his emotion. Isn't it? You know. Just simple strength of emotion. He is not interested in any science. So when devotees started building temples, they started building it whichever way they like. It's their love affair. You know, no rules, no science, no nothing. Their love affair just made them do lingas whichever way they feel like it. So, the science of making it sort of receded. But if it is properly made, it can be such a powerful energy form that people can experience it in an enormous way. It can be a great tool of transformation for people. Have you sat there for some time, any of you? You should just sit there, don't believe any nonsense. Simply sit there, don't think of Shiva and all this business. Simply just sit there, without any prejudice about it, without any beliefs about it, just sit there. It will shake you from the root of your spine. It'll just set forth a completely different process within you. Without a single instruction, you will be initiated into a very powerful process in the presence of Dhyanalinga. There's too much behind it, let's not go at it now. Those of you who want to know much more about it, most of you have the Mystics' Musings. The last chapter is all about Dhyanalinga.
When we talk about Shiva's 100 names or 1000 names, or Ashtamurti, or Tatpurush to the east, Aghora to the south, and so on and so forth, is it that these are manifestations, they are actual pieces of that jigsaw, of that huge, gigantic elephant? Or is it a problem with the person who's trying to perceive? Is it a keyhole problem? Or is it a bit of both?
It is a keyhole problem, but maybe whoever spoke about this, they had the same problem that I have, trying to make the transcendent transactional. If you talk about infinity, nobody is going to get it. If you talk about a zillion, some people think they get it. You have to put a number. So if you say, he is nothing, nobody is going to get it. If you say he is 1008, some people who can count, they can get it. So probably the ancients, sages and seers had the same problem to make the transcendent transactional. In that effort, they might have said whatever they might have said.
In that case, what exactly is a lingam? I'm not necessarily talking about the Dhyana lingam or the Jyotirlingams yet, but in principle, what exactly is a lingam? Is that also transactional?
The word linga comes from the word lina. Essentially it means the form. Everything is a form. This is the form. Why is it called the form? Is today it is established beyond doubt. There are scientists who have computer simulations of what could have happened when the Big Bang happened. And the simulations show that an ellipsoid is formed. And today, cosmologists who have been looking through powerful telescopes or through radio waves and stuff like that, they're also saying the core of many galaxies are ellipsoid. There are more galaxies, nameless, countless number of galaxies which are ellipsoid in nature. But there are some which we observe more easily, which are spiral in nature. Spiraling galaxies are more visible because they're still expanding. Because they're expanding, they're full of gases which are turning into material, so their stars are burning bright, so you see them more observable. Galaxies which have more ellipsoid core are less observable because the gaseous levels there has lowered, the stars are not burning very bright. I must tell you this. Probably in 70s when the American and Soviet competition or soft war, they call it what, Cold War. At that time, everybody wanting to prove who is scientifically more advanced than the other. Unfortunately, they're again back to the same game now. So they wanted to explore, both the countries wanted to explore a nuclear device, a very powerful nuclear device on the moon. And they would have done it. The only reason why they did not do it is they realized if they explode a nuclear bomb on the planet, it will create a huge fireball like a sun, about the same temperature as the core of the sun, and a mushroom cloud and all this. All this won't happen on the moon because there is no atmosphere. You can't even see in the blast, it may be just a small cracker. So then they gave up because they can't create the drama on the planet. If you looked at the moon today, it is burning with a nuclear explosion and we can claim we did it. That's how crude we've become, all right? But they didn't do it. Fortunately, there is no atmosphere in moon. If it blasts, you can't really make out much. So this is what I am saying, where there are no gases, where the gaseous material is limited or thin, there you cannot see the brightness of the burning star. So because of this, the elliptical core, the galaxies with elliptical cores are less visible. Galaxies which are spiral are more visible. But it's well established that the core of most galaxies are ellipsoid in nature, elliptical. Even the solar system is elliptical in its motion. So ellipse is a natural form that happens because when that which is unmanifest begins to manifest, the first form is an ellipse or an ellipsoid. A three-dimensional ellipse is an ellipsoid. And we know this from our experience, that if we become meditative to a point where your contact with your physical body becomes very minimal, you are almost not the body, then once again our energies take the form of a ellipsoid. So this perfect ellipsoid is a linga. As you see, they're sitting there in the water. So, this is called a linga because this is the beginning, this is the end. Or let's look at it this way, this is the front door to creation and this is the back door to creation. You can enter whichever way you want.
I was in Turkey just 2 weeks ago. You've heard of Konya? Outside in the garden, so many broken pieces, huge faces, half faces, all kinds of things. Old temples all broken and made foundation stone. So we were just walking through and there in the garden I found about 4.5 feet or more about 4 feet 9 inches kind of linga, properly created linga, an ellipsoid stone. So, wow. And when we looked at the history and things like that, they said this is almost 4,700 years old. 4,700 years ago, there was a full-fledged temple with almost 5 feet tall lingam which was in worship. And it was consecrated that long ago, still alive. Cracked a little bit, so got disturbed, and I was just demonstrating for the few, 3-4 people who were with me. Every point in the linga is different. You know, different points in the linga are differently done, beautifully done piece. I mean, whoever worked on it, they knew what they were doing, not rudimentary job, very subtle work. Still alive, 4,700 years, thrown out in the garden, not worshipped, still alive because of little bit of cracks that have happened. Some disturbances happened to the whole thing, but still there. I just demonstrated, I felt this, and then because they had to see, we put the Rudraksh and showed them how at different places, how the linga behaves differently. So, this work has been done in the past plenty, but when very, when my way or no way attitude came, these things were all razed to the ground in many ways. Otherwise, whole of Europe was full of temples like this, consecrated spaces like this. These eastern temples were never built as places of prayer. Even today in India, nobody ever leads a prayer in a temple. You're not supposed to pray or worship, but you're just supposed to sit there and come. The idea was people will go and sit there and benefit. This is how a temple was created. No priest, no prayer. There is a maintenance person who is now calling himself a priest. Certain families were appointed to maintain the sanctity of the place, to keep it going in a certain way. You are just supposed to go there, sit there for some time and come. In South India, this tradition is still alive. In North, it's been disturbed because the brunt of invasions North India took, South India left. The Deccan Plateau was generally left untouched by the outside invaders. So you were just supposed to sit there. Nobody leads a prayer, nobody teaches you a prayer, nobody says you must do this or that. You just sit there and imbibe this, because these are all consecrated spaces. They created many. All these things were razed to ground. Only few that are left are generally in India and some other Southeast Asian countries. Otherwise, whole of Arabia and Europe were full of consecrated spaces.